the 20th of February, 2014, on the main street of the Kiev, horrible things happened. And this was a point of no return to Ukraine as we know it. From the very early morning, unidentified shooters opened fire on the protesters and on law enforcement. Tensions were very high, and both sides were furious. President Viktor Yanukovych, Special Forces of Berkut, and Special Security Services forces were immediately blamed for the killings. Angry crowds of protesters began to attack the police.
Who shot the protesters? Do you have an idea?
The first official government investigation started. Investigators accused Special Forces of Berkut, Viktor Yanukovych, President Putin's assistant Vladislav Surkov, and Russian Spetsnaz. All the accusations were lacking one thing: evidence.
Someone who has been gathering this evidence is Professor Ivan Kachanovsky from the University of Ottawa in Canada.
Professor Kachanovsky kept investigating the events of the Maidan massacre during the last 5 years. In his extensive scientific research, based on a cross-examination of the video and audio files throughout the timeline of the shooting, he got much further in his investigation than all of the official teams together.
This was quite unprecedented, to have so many television cameras, basically, so many journalists following and witnessing such a mass killing. On mostly all television networks in the United States, in Canada, Ukraine, Germany, Poland, all different countries, with exception of Russia, it was presented basically as evidence that this was massacre by police.
Here, police fire on protesters with AK-47s and sniper rifles.
During the 5 years of official investigation of the Maidan massacre, very important facts were completely ignored. Snipers were located in buildings under the control of protesters. During the investigation, Professor Kachanovsky discovered even more horrifying facts.
And only recently, actually, I found a footage which was filmed by this Belgian television from Hotel Ukraine. This video shows they were walking to the spot of the massacre. They were not walking just on their own. They were led by 2 other protesters who were very loudly calling them to this site. No reason to go there, and they were specifically called into this massacre spot.
Victims were escorted to the places it was planned for them to be killed and filmed. In Professor Kachanovsky's investigation, that was based on scientifically organized analysis of all available video and audio recordings, he reached a conclusion. The Maidan massacre was key in a plan of an ongoing coup d'etat, and killings were planned in advance.
There were 2 interviews published in the recent book by a Ukrainian pro-Maidan journalist. And in this book, they produced interviews of 2 far-right leaders of Ukraine. One was head of Svoboda Party, and another was the deputy head of the parliament of Ukraine at the time of Maidan massacre, who was also one of the leaders of this far-right Svoboda Party. And they and Maidan leaders met with some senior Western officials. And this Western official told them basically that killings of a few protesters is not enough for Western government to change support. They said specifically, end of recognition of Yanukovych government basically would change only if number of victims would be 100. The Western government policy changed immediately after Maidan massacre. Not an accident, because you have exactly 100 people who were killed. Over these 4 years, a lot of versions have been made public. A lot of television footage was filmed about the fact that they were Georgian snipers, or that someone else did this in order to provoke confrontation and bloodshed. The fact it has not yet been established who started shooting at the protesters. And if this has not yet been accomplished in 4.5 years, then as a person who understands a thing or two about law and criminal investigations, I can tell you that it will remain unresolved.
Research has revealed there were snipers at the Maidan. The forensics, where the angle of the shooting, bodies of the police and the protesters, it was very badly investigated. Not at all, really. But what evidence we have seems to point to there being Georgian snipers.
Нет, я вот знаю о том, о чем вы сказали. Вот, знаю о том, что действовавшие тогда власти во главе с президентом Януковичем не использовали армию и не были заинтересованы в том, чтобы давать хоть какой-то повод для действий силового характера со стороны оппозиции. И как мне неоднократно говорил господин Янукович, у него даже в голове не укладывалось применить силу против гражданского населения, даже против тех людей, которые уже взяли в руки оружие. Вот я полностью исключаю, что это он мог сделать. А вот те, кто искали повод для госпереворота, те, конечно, вполне могли.
I remember you were telling me about the Obama phone call.
President Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin still disagree on all the basic facts in Ukraine, but the two leaders are talking about a potential, and I must capitalize that word, potential resolution to this crisis.
Obama and you had an agreement that there would be no firing, and he gave you a promise that he would.
Ну, вы знаете, Обама уже не президент, но тем не менее есть определенные вещи, о которых мы публично не говорим. Во всяком случае, могу так сказать, что наши договоренности, которые были достигнуты в этом телефонном разговоре, с американской стороны не были исполнены. Я бы на этом ограничился, не стал бы в детали вдаваться.
But murderers get away with murder after a successful coup d'etat.
These events that occurred on Maidan, that started in the end of November and ended on February 21-22, 2014, they were mostly predetermined as elements of external management, which were then actually implemented by Washington in Ukraine. First, non-governmental funds, organizations, and government officials, represented by Mrs. Nuland, then by Vice President Biden, and by many others, openly supported the escalation of violence, which resulted in the overthrow of power. The most interesting thing is that the armed actions, they really took place, and there were signs of a crime in these actions. These were serious crimes. But when that happened, by the time they ended in February 21-22, the government had already granted amnesty. So a law was passed that there would not be prosecution of people who participated in the protests. And according to this law, all participants were exonerated, including those who committed crimes. Moreover, in Article 9 of this law, it is forbidden to collect personal data, meaning those who later came to power. So they established the ground in advance. So those who performed any criminal activity at that time couldn't be prosecuted. We understand that the seizure of power happened by force of arms, but no one ever took, nor will ever take, the responsibility for that. Legislative solution was adopted in this regard. I gave you the example of Article 9 of the law on amnesty of February 21st, 2014, for a reason where it is forbidden to collect personal data and to record any actions that were related to those who protested. So to those people who could participate or organize what you call today using weapons,
Nationalist groups, they burned your villa down.
basically, no. It was in February 2014, just in the heat of the events on Maidan.
Yeah, but who burned it down?
These were national radicals, yes. The fact is that over the years, the investigation pretended that the case was investigated, but they couldn't identify the perpetrators.
So, no justice.
There is no justice in this matter, and in general, and probably there is no point in expecting it, because this is not the only event that affected me or my family. Because in 2014 and 2015, there were attempts to occupy my office.
Піти разом з нами, взяти шини, там візьмемо їх 5-10, запалимо, як це було на Майдані. Далі проведемо віче і підемо мочити покидька Медведчука, якого штаб тут неподалеку зараз розташувався.
And several times, my office was set on fire. This is all because of disagreement with my position, which I state publicly and openly, and which neither the government nor the national radicals like. By the way, the last attempt of setting my office on fire was several months ago, in September 2018. And the problem is that since 2014, the government has lost its very important function. As an expert in state-building issues, I can say this function is the use of violence.
So, why do so many Ukrainians hate Russia so much?
This is related to the processes that have occurred during these last 4 years. In order to bring this division, a split in relations between Russia and Ukraine. This is the policy of today's government, which has been elevated to the level of state policy.